and welcome back to our How to Paint series. Once again, this is going to be our kind of finished product of our Bladeguard veterans. And if you watch the last few parts, you'll know that we're kind of working on these two other guys here. I think today will kind of be the last video in this specific series. So we're just going to jump right in, give ourselves plenty of time. And we are starting out with our, if I can avoid spilling it, Balthazar Gold, as always. And we just want to touch up a few of kind of the details that we didn't quite get to last time. Starting out with this little skull here. Now a helpful trick is to use the back of your paintbrush. That'll kind of let you get the more raised up areas without having to touch anything else. And while we're here, we might as well fix a few of the little problems that we missed in the last few parts. Do a little bit of cleanup here while we have a minute. And just a little bit more touch up on the shield here. I think that's kind of our main focus, at least on this model. The other guy is actually looking pretty good shield-wise, so I don't think we have to touch that much. We just have to do the kind of oath papers, and then we should be kind of finished with that. And we also, I forgot to do the bottom of this guy's holster. So we'll do that with this bronze color as well. Just very quickly make sure we get every side of it that we can at least see here. We'll try to get the back. It's a little bit of an awkward angle, but give it a shot as good as we can. And just kind of taking a look here, we'll see what else we kind of need to touch up. It's basically going to be what most of this episode is doing kind of touch-ups. But we'll also be doing a wash on pretty much the entire model itself, and then we'll also be doing the base as well, just to give us a little bit of variety with that kind of sand texture. I like I think it's Vallejo, maybe? No. Yeah, it is actually. I'm looking at the bottle right behind me. It's Vallejo earth texture is what I use for the kind of sand on the base there. I like it a lot, but I do kind of think it's a little bit bland on its own. Adding something like Agrax Earthshade or Null Oil to that does help kind of shake it up just a little bit to give you a nice kind of non-monotone feeling. And as always, I didn't put nearly enough paint on our palette, so we're going to add a little bit more bronze to it and get right back to finishing off this kind of sword handle, I guess. Crossguard, I'm not sure what you technically call this, but we'll do the best we can to cover it all. And we're going to keep this episode at around 20 minutes. If I have to, I'll kind of do a little bit of a jump cut, and we'll just pick up kind of once I'm kind of more finished with it. But we will do everything we want to do in this part. I don't really want to drag it out to another episode, but we might just have to do a little bit of a cut in between. And we're going to focus on this plasma pistol here. I think this will be kind of our finishing thing, is doing the dry brushing effect on the plasma pistol. So if this is all you're interested in, maybe skip to the end. Or don't. Watch the whole thing. I'd appreciate that too. And as always, feel free to like and subscribe. It greatly helps my channel, helps me kind of get feedback, helps me grow a little bit. And as always, I like to give a quick shout out. I do have a Patreon. Link is in the description. It just kind of helps me make more videos more often. So if this is something you like and you want to see more, feel free to check that out. Minimum donation is $1 a month, I believe. Actually, no, I'm certain that it is. I set it up, right? So, if that's something you want to contribute towards, I'd appreciate it greatly. Don't feel obligated, though. I'm not your dad. I can't make you do things, so don't worry about it too much. And something I haven't really mentioned, but I want to do it, is these shoulder pads, pauldrons, I guess. These are kind of unique to the Bladeguard and aggressors, I think. Maybe the Gravis armor guys. They have a unique kind of design to them I really like, but they do have a lot of edge painting to do. So we'll be doing that with this bronze as well. I think this should kind of finish up everything bronze that we want on this model at least, and then we'll switch back to our other guy. This is kind of a headache though to do. I'll see if I can't adjust my light to make this a little bit easier, because there's just so much junk in the way. And of course we'll do a little bit of cleanup and it'll look marginally better, but for the most part it's going to look more or less kind of what we're doing here. Doing a general kind of overview of the whole thing. We did fine here on the bottom, and then we get closer to the top and I just horribly butchered it, but it's fine. Don't worry about it too much. And I do want to go, if I can hold this properly, along the inside here as well. And we'll leave that bottom kind of that bone white, just to kind of showcase it's two separate pieces. And we will do the exact same thing on the other side. If I have nearly enough paint on my palette, as always. The problem with, keeping enough paint and kind of walking that line is, number one, I don't want to waste paint, which is kind of counterintuitive. I feel like not using a wet palette, I end up wasting a lot of paint anyways. But also, I don't want to let myself fall into the habit of having too much paint on my brush. Because that is equally as detrimental as having paint that's too thick. And if you're someone who's kind of struggling with paint thickness and how thin it should be, that might be an issue you're running into, is just how much paint is actually on your brush. So, try changing that a little bit before you jump into the deep end of thinking that your paint is just still too thick, because that might not entirely be the problem. Still might be. I won't sugarcoat it. That could entirely be an issue still, but I found, at least when I was first starting out, that was a much bigger issue, was how thick my paint was kind of overshadowed by how much I had on my brush at any given time. So that's a useful skill to kind of master early on. And we're doing the same thing as before with this pauldron. And we'll just do the interior kind of top here as well. And it's not very pretty, but it's fine. We will fix it up before we move on to the kind of final parts. And I think that's kind of everything bronze we want to cover on this guy. There's actually a tiny little bit of green I want to cover up on that shield as well while I'm right here. Otherwise I'll forget about it. You know how I am. And let's get a little bit more paint off of our brush so I don't mess this up horribly. I still probably will, but there we go. Just make that look a little bit nicer. And we didn't butcher it, so that's good. I'll take that, And we'll just finish this guy up just a little bit. Perfect. I think that's kind of everything bronze we want on this guy. So we will go back to our other dude. And we'll do essentially the exact same thing, but we will just kind of finish up with where we left off. Again, these pauldrons. Very quick and easy if I don't totally butcher it by getting paint where I don't mean to. And of course, get a little bit more on our palette here. I feel like that's just a running theme at this point, as I just never have enough paint, but that's alright. And very carefully, we'll see if we can't get the bottom of this without messing it up. And of course not. my shaky hands there come in for the ruin, but that's alright. We'll fix it up. Again, we'll do a jump cut kind of towards the end where I will fix everything, and then we'll come and finish it off, just so we can kind of get a final product without having to waste 4 hours on one model. Wow, I really butchered it there. Don't pay attention to that. It's just gonna make me look bad, but that's all right. Mistakes are something that you're gonna make very often while you're doing this, and it's something that should be embraced. It's not something to shy away from, because making mistakes only makes you a better painter, in my opinion. And you're allowed to disagree with that if you want. you know, it's fine. It's all about mindset, right? As Bob Ross once said, there is no mistakes, it's just happy little accidents. Don't know if that strictly applies in terms of, you know, model painting, but we'll run with it still. And very carefully kind of run along the edge of this plate. It's not too bad on the back there. On the front we kind of butchered it, but that's fine. And again, we'll do this front as carefully as we kind of can. There we go. We did that a little bit better. And also make sure you get the underside of the shoulder pads as well. It's kind of important, depending on how you're kind of looking at it. From what angle, I suppose, is a better way of phrasing that. And the same thing on this side. We want to get that kind of hidden underside there. And the top as well. Just to make sure we cover everything we can. Do a little bit of touch up on the top. And it's not perfect, but it's covered. And, you know, like I said, excuse me, 50 times before, I will do some minor touch-ups off camera. But just kind of looking over what we have while we fix up the shield a little bit. I think next is going to be our oath papers. I still think that's what they're called. I feel like that is, but at the same time it just kind of feels like it's not. I feel like there's a different word for it. And this is kind of a fun one. We haven't really done much contrast paint, but we are going to be using Magos Purple. And just adding a little bit of water to it. We'll get it right on our palette. And we'll be applying these. I think this guy only has one or two. He only has one, actually. And it's right here in his little shoulder, or leg piece. Whoops. It's kind of the opposite of what I was trying to describe. And you want to make sure you just get every angle of it, the side, the top, the bottom, if you can. And not too much. If it's nice and watered down, it'll kind of pull inside of that little wax seal very nicely. And we'll do the same thing with this guy, except we do it like 6 more times because our sergeant here has plenty of these little seals. And again, just do every angle to the best of your ability. If you spill it, don't worry too much. We'll just go right back over that with our Wraithbone. And an important thing to note is that if you're applying this to something that is like green or any other color but a light Wraithbone or like a white, it really won't go on very well. So if you're, you spilled any paint on any of these seals that shouldn't be there, make sure you clean that up a little bit first. Otherwise, your Magos Purple here or any other kind of contrast paint really won't go on very well. And I think that's all of the seals. He might have one more. Looks like that's it. Once these dry, we'll go back over them 1 or 2 more times just to kind of get that nice dark purple effect we kind of got on our guy over here. But moving on, taking a look at what else we can kind of do. I know what we want to do. I've been missing this for like 3 episodes now. I want to do his chest pauldron thing, whatever you call that. His like skull with the wings on it. Been meaning to do that for a hot minute, but unfortunately I've just been forgetting. We're going back to the Caliban green, and if I can do this properly, we're going to be using a really washed out version of it, just adding a bunch of water. And this is kind of a tougher spot to reach without kind of spilling your paint everywhere, but we're going to try it. And of course this guy has a shield like right in the middle of the way, so it might be a little bit more awkward. But we're just going to get as much of this as we can without spilling over. And so far we're not doing too bad. Don't jinx it. Oh, I spilled it a little bit. Get that skull as well. And then we want to get that other side, which is much easier. Maybe. Just kind of given the angle we have. If you can, kind of get the back of that shield a little bit. Of course, I spilled it onto the shield, but that's fine. Hopefully we can catch that before it dries. Maybe. Maybe. Oh, we got most of it. It's not too noticeable, but we'll go back over it with Wraithbone in a hot second here. And I want to do one more little layer on that left-hand side. I didn't properly kind of get all of it. And then we will just touch up that right as well. That's the nice part about using these really thin layers, is that they dry very quickly. So basically, as soon as you're done, you can go right back over them again, and it's not really going to affect kind of the thickness of your paint. The thicker your layers, the longer they take to dry. It's kind of a pro tip there for you. And we'll get a little bit more on our palette here, not too much. This only takes 1 or 2 passes to finish up, and we're going to do the same thing on this guy. I think I've unfortunately kind of butchered this side a little bit, but that's okay. We'll clean it up. And we're going to do the exact same thing. As you get kind of closer to the edge, just kind of very lightly press with your brush. It'll get that raised up area for you. If you press too hard, it'll just go right into those recesses, and you really don't want that. And again, this little kind of chest shield thing is in the way a little bit. So do your best to get behind there, but don't worry about it too much. It's not something that's very noticeable from most angles. And we'll do our best to get that top edge there. Just clean up anything we mess up with a little bit of Wraithbone afterwards. We won't worry about it too much. And I think that's kind of everything major that we're going to do now. I'm going to do a little bit of touch-up. We'll clean up a lot of these areas. I'll probably paint these eyes red. Actually, we can do that while we're here. Just because it's something that I'm sure I'm going to mess up, and then I'm going to have to go back over. And then once I finish that, we'll kind of cut it, and then I'll finish up everything that needs cleanup, and then we'll come back and we'll do our washes. But while we're here, just because this is kind of a difficult thing to do, we'll get our red nice and thinned, and we'll apply this to the eye kind of as cleanly as we can. I can guarantee you right now this is going to go on horribly, but it's fine. Yeah, it's not too terrible. And same thing over here. Absolutely butchered it, but it's fine. Everything outside of that eye lens is just going to be covered in Wraithbone. Whoa, don't spill my paint, please. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. If I was a smarter man, I'd be using kind of a smaller brush, but this is fine too. With my hands being as shaky as they are, it's never going to really look that clean, so I would rather just spill it all now and clean it up than just have to deal with meticulously kind of doing it. So I'm going to leave it there. This is kind of our, it's going to be like a before and after kind of thing, right? This is going to be our before on both of these guys. We will come back and we'll do a wash, and then we'll do especially this plasma gun on this guy. So join me in just a second. I'm going to do a little cut here, and we will be right back. We are finally back. I've done a little bit of touch-up on our 2 models we were working on before. They're still not quite perfect, but they're kind of close enough to the end result that we want, so we'll roll with it anyway. If I can find where I just put my brush here, we are going to be moving on with, starting out with our little plasma pistol. Now, if you watch my Dreadnought video, you'll kind of know the same principle of how we did this. We're starting out with this Techless blue layer. It's a very bright, nice color that I like a lot. And once we get it thinned down a little bit, we're just going to be applying it basically directly to these plasma coils here, kind of as cleanly as we can. You want to leave a little bit of that white at the bottom if you're able to. Unfortunately, I don't think I am. That's fine. We'll roll with the punches here. And then we're going to be doing a little bit of dry brushing on top of this, which I think is always the most fun part of this whole thing. I really like these plasma guns. I have a joy dry brushing them. And it's very simple once you kind of get used to it. And again, it's making sure we have a decent amount of water mixed in with our paint. We're going to do the same thing on this side. And while this is kind of drying, we're going to start with the other major component of the last little section here. And that is going to be our Agrax Earthshade. Now, there's two components to this. Now that I've learned how to kind of properly apply this, we're going to be using our Citadel starter brush here. It's a little bit bigger than what we were using before. And with a little bit of water on our brush, we kind of want like a 50% water, 50% Earthshade kind of mix going on here. So we'll get this on our palette, kind of nice and thinned out. And we're just going to generally apply this to kind of everywhere where that wraithbone is. And that's a little bit too heavy, so we're going to kind of spread it out if we can. And we're going to do this just all over our model here. Don't worry about getting it on anything that isn't wraithbone. It won't really show up too much. And it might actually help kind of, add a little bit of detail to some of those other sections. But we're going to do this just everywhere we can. If you miss any of it, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. So don't worry about it too much. It's going to be really obvious where you have and haven't already gone over. And make sure you get that other side of the leg there. It does like to hide from you. And we'll get a little bit more on our brush. And same thing with the other leg. It's very quick, very easy to do. And it's not only going to make our armor look a little bit more grungy and grim, it's also going to give us some nice shadowing with kind of some of the recesses in our model as well. Just very naturally does that. And as always, I don't apply nearly enough to my palette. I'm actually going to get a little bit more water mixed in. I know you can't really see what I'm doing behind the scenes here, but just imagine, right? I'm just painting, or mixing paints rather. And we'll do the same thing with this backpack here. Again, everything wraithbone we want to cover very nice and thoroughly. This might take you a couple layers to do. I kind of managed to do it in one because I apply it somewhat thick. But maybe that's not what you like. Maybe you want it applied a little bit thinner. Maybe you don't want your guys looking quite as dirty or grim, and that's fine too. Just thin out your paint a little bit more, and you'll kind of get less of an effect here. But being Bladeguard veterans, I feel like they're really in the thick of it. I feel like they'd really be quite torn apart and just really ruined in terms of how their armor looks. We'll get that little part of their scabbard as well. And already you can kind of see it's looking much closer to the official like Death Guard color palette now that we've added this wash. And one last little section that I usually forget, but we'll get it here, is the back of the shield. We'll do that as well. It's kind of a weird angle to get, but stay with me here. You can also do the front of the shield if you really want to. I'm not going to. I feel like the green doesn't really show up very well with the wash. But we will, as a kind of final touch on this guy, get that oath paper as well. This will give you kind of the appearance of a little bit of writing on it without actually having to go in and adding any writing yourself. It's very quick and easy to do, and that's what we like. And I think we'll also get the chest pad here, chest piece, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's kind of the last little bit. Perfect. Just doing a last little once over. I think that's pretty much everything I can kind of see on this guy. So we will call him finished, and we'll move on to our other model here. We're going to do the exact same thing, pretty liberally, just all over. And you might notice I actually painted their tactical rocks. I think it was in between parts I did that. I just used, I think, the Rakarth flesh. I didn't want it to be too bright or, too dark. That way it kind of blends in a little bit with the sand, but not too much to the point where it looks like it's part of it. I wanted just a little bit of distinction there, and get a little bit more on our palette. I want to mix in a little bit more water. I feel like I'm just adding this way too dark, and sometimes that works out fine, but it's not quite in my favor to do that the way I've been doing it. So we'll change it up a little bit. There we go. That's a little bit more of the consistency of what I want. Thinning your paints is entirely one thing to learn, but making sure your washes are kind of the darkness and consistency that you want is a whole different ball game. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And you're just constantly having to juggle that as you go back and forth here. And as you're adding more to your brush. But it's fine, we'll roll with it. And this episode's probably going to go a little bit longer than it normally does. That's fine, I'm not too bothered about it. If you've been watching thus far, that's great. If not, that's fine too. I don't judge you for wanting to not sit through, half-hour episodes. But if you've, really, really stuck it out this long, I do appreciate your patronage. As always, it does help if you like and subscribe. I'm really trying to grow this channel, and every little bit helps, And as soon as we're done with the shield here, we'll moving right back onto that plasma gun. Again, it's just a lot of dry brushing, basically. Which is nice because it means we don't really have to wait for it to dry. We can just do one layer on top of another. And that about does it. I think we'll take one last little look around here. And tell you what, we'll even get this little inside leg piece we kind of missed. And that should be about it for the most part. Perfect. Alright, we're moving on to the final piece. This is it. This is the big finale. The plasma gun. Speaking of which, my next project is going to be the Hell Blasters that are part of this combat patrol. I am very excited to do them. I have the Sergeant already assembled. They're kind of a pain to assemble, honestly. So it might take me a hot minute to get that out, but it is something I am working on. And we're going to start out with this Emmerich Blue. I don't know if I've already showcased that or not, but as always with our dry brushes, you just want to get most of your pigment off. And it's kind of awkward to do because it's such a small little area compared to the Dreadnought gun we were working on before. But we generally want to cover a good bit of it. A nice glow kind of effect. We went pretty liberal on this side, but that's fine. We'll roll with it. I'll tell you what, we'll match it up on this side a little bit. It's not going to look too great, but we'll deal with it. And our other paint we want to use here is our Rack White. Make sure we get all of this off of our brush before we move forward, just so we don't end up mixing our paints too much here. I don't want to ruin my white paint pot. And we're going to do the exact same thing with our white. And it's kind of harder to tell when you have it all off of your brush or not, but we're going to hope for the best, and we'll just do kind of the top of the gun here. Your lighter color is always going to be closer to your heat source, and white is definitely that, so we will do it just on the top. And it kind of naturally blends a little bit. That's perfect, that's what we want. And we just want to even out both sides until they are pretty equal. This is a burning hot plasma gun. We might have overdone it a little bit, but overall I'm pretty happy with that effect. And without further ado, that kind of wraps us up here. If I can, of course these bases you can just paint with your Abaddon black. I don't really have the time to do that in this episode. We're already kind of stretching it thin. But this is kind of our final showcase. We have our 3 models done. Of course, this is the one that I did before we did this series, just to kind of compare and contrast. And always, I want to thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you join me for the next episode. And I already mentioned it, but I do have a Patreon. If you want to support that, link is in the description. Otherwise, just like, comment, or subscribe. I really appreciate all that as well. And hopefully, I will see you guys in the next episode.